To the next stage of the deployment pipeline, we're going to talk about the staging environment. So the staging environment at a high level is where security and load testing are done. Also user acceptance testing. Sometimes in some organizations called the UAT, uh, but we'll call it the staging environment. So user acceptance tests are what the name says. You have real or simulated users exercise the systems. Having real users exercise the system, that's expensive and difficult to ensure coverage, just to cover all kinds of special cases. On the other hand, having real users allows for a better type of exception testing. So you're sort of trading off coverage versus accepted testing than automated tests. Uh, so you test for performance with generated loads. Sometimes you use the actual history of requests over a period of time. That's another way of generating the load. So the environment should be as real as possible. It's load balancing, it's auto scale, there are multiple instances. Uh, the database is as close to real data as possible. So one organization uses a database that's an hour old and which is created automatically by the cloud vendor. The constraints are that if it's a big database, this is a very difficult thing to do. Uh, you want to restore the database after each test so that the tests are independent, and you want to keep personal information private. And if you're using real data, even if it's an hour old, there are special techniques that you need to do in order to do that. So you also test for security. So there's something called the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database, CVE. And the most common types of vulnerabilities are buffer overflow. So you don't test in your code whether or not the buffer has been overflowed, so people know how to exploit that. And another form of essentially getting the same effect is SQL injection. So if you SQL has the ability to escape for special characters, and if you do that in a particular way, then again, it's an ability to take over at least a portion of the system. So there are penetration testing tools. There are tools to test for these kinds of things. Uh, there are also static analyzers. So a static analyzer will look at the code, and every time you allocate memory, it'll test to see whether you check to see whether that memory is exceeded and things like that. Uh, a hard and fast rule is do not access the production database. So staging environments must be isolated from production database. I did a survey of people and asked about operations errors, and accessing the production database came up several times as a source of errors. So what kind of testing do you do? It's much the same. Many of them are the same tests we've seen before. You do regression testing against known errors. You do smoke testing just to make sure everything works correctly. You do compatibility testing. Are pieces working together? Integration testing, again, same type of thing. There's functional tests implicit in this, but you also do usability testing, and another type of testing you would do would be install and uninstall. So what happens from the staging environment is that it goes into the production environment where it might get rolled back. And so you need to test that the rollback procedures are valid and that the installation procedures are valid. So to summarize, the staging environment is a place where you test for non-functional qualities such as performance, usability, and security. Management of the database during these types of tests is complicated. You have to have enough data so that you can test for performance under heavier load or bigger data. You have to restore the database after each test so that the tests are independent, and you have to make sure that private data remains private.